Close your eyes for a second. Imagine you're standing on a hilltop. It's October. The air is dry and cool. The land around you is all limestone and scrubland, the kind of place where nothing much seems to happen. You're in southeastern Turkey. The city of Şanlıurfa is about 6 miles that way. And then you look down. And you see them. Massive stone pillars. Rising out of the earth. Taller than you expected. Arranged in circles, almost like someone planned it. And carved with animals you can still recognize. Foxes. Vultures. Scorpions. Snakes. And on some of them, arms. Hands. A belt. You think, who made this? And then someone tells you the answer. According to researchers and radiocarbon dating, this place is approximately 12,000 years old. That is 6,000 years before Stonehenge. That is 7,000 years before the pyramids at Giza. And according to archaeologists, it was built by people who had not yet learned to farm. People who had not yet built cities. People who, by every old textbook in existence, were not supposed to be capable of this. Welcome to Göbekli Tepe. And I promise you, by the time this is over, you will never think about what it means to be human quite the same way again. Okay, so here's the part of this story that I genuinely cannot get over. Because this whole thing, all of it, almost stayed buried. In 1963, a team of archaeologists from the University of Chicago and Istanbul University actually visited this hill. According to the German Archaeological Institute's own records, they walked around, they looked at the broken limestone pieces poking out of the ground, and they filed their report. Their conclusion? Probably a medieval cemetery. Not significant. They moved on. And for 30 years, this 12,000-year-old wonder just sat there. In a field. Getting rained on. Getting occasionally grazed over by farmers' goats. A few of the pillars were actually scarred by agricultural plows, according to excavation reports, because they were sitting that close to the surface. Then in 1994, a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt was doing a regional survey of prehistoric sites in southeastern Turkey. He came across that old Chicago report, just a footnote, really. A brief mention. And something about it nagged at him. So he went. According to accounts of that visit, documented by the German Archaeological Institute, the moment Schmidt arrived and saw the shape of the mound and the pieces of limestone sticking out of the soil, something clicked. He reportedly said, "Only man could have created something like this." It was clear right away, this was a gigantic Stone Age site. He came back the following year. With 5 colleagues. They started digging. And within that first season, within just weeks, they had already unearthed the tops of megalithic pillars arranged in circles. Klaus Schmidt would go on to spend the next 20 years of his life at this site. He bought a traditional Ottoman house in the nearby city of Şanlıurfa, that became his base. He excavated every spring. Every autumn. He never really left. Not until his death, from a heart attack, in July 2014. 20 years. For one hill. Something tells me he knew what he'd found. So let me actually describe what this place looks like. Because I think most people, even people who've heard the name, don't quite have the full picture. Göbekli Tepe, which translates roughly from Turkish as Potbelly Hill, sits at the very top of a limestone mountain ridge in Şanlıurfa province, in the southeastern corner of Turkey. It's about 15 meters high, that's almost 50 feet, and covers an area of roughly 9 hectares. That's about the size of 12 football fields. But here's what stops archaeologists cold. According to researchers, only about 10% of the site has been excavated. 10%. What they found in that 10% includes at least 20 large stone structures, circular and oval enclosures, built down into the bedrock itself. The largest, which researchers call Building D, measures 65 feet across. At its center stand 2 freestanding T-shaped limestone pillars, each about 18 feet tall and each weighing, according to estimates from the DAI, approximately 8 tons. Their pedestals are carved directly from the bedrock. Like they grew out of the earth. And here's something that genuinely gave me chills when I first read it. A 2020 study published in the Cambridge Archaeological Journal by researchers Hackley and Gopher from Tel Aviv University found that 3 of the main enclosures were laid out in a near-perfect equilateral triangle, each side measuring almost exactly the same length. According to the study, this indicates the structures were planned as a single architectural project. Geometry. 12,000 years ago. Before farming. Before writing. Before everything. Now I need to talk about these pillars properly. Because they are, I think, the single most mind-bending thing about this whole place. They're T-shaped. And that shape, according to researchers at the German Archaeological Institute, is deliberate. The horizontal bar at the top is believed to represent a human head. The vertical column represents the body. And when you get close to them, really close, you start to see what's carved into the sides. Arms. Running down the body of the pillar. Bent at the elbows. Hands meeting at the front. Belts. And what appears to be a loincloth-style garment. These aren't just rocks. According to the archaeologists who've studied them, these are stylized human, or possibly supernatural human-like, beings. And surrounding them, carved into the walls and the smaller pillars all around the enclosures, animals. Foxes. Vultures. Snakes. Scorpions. Spiders. Lions. Wild boar. Cranes. Ducks. According to researchers, each enclosure appears to have a dominant animal, carved again and again throughout that specific space. Some archaeologists at Tel Aviv University have suggested this may indicate that different hunter-gatherer groups, each with their own symbolic animal, may have built and gathered in their own dedicated enclosure. Now, here's where I need you to just sit with something for a second. The people who carved all of this, they were using flint tools. No metal. No iron chisels. No wheels. No pulleys. And yet according to the research, and researchers estimate this specifically, quarrying, shaping, transporting, and erecting just one of these 8-ton pillars would have required hundreds of coordinated workers. According to archaeologist Klaus Schmidt and subsequent researchers at the DAI, the logistics alone demand a level of social organization, of leadership, planning, coordination, and shared purpose, that we simply did not believe existed this early in human history. This wasn't supposed to be possible. And yet there it is. Still standing. Still waiting. So who were these people? According to the best archaeological evidence available, specifically the analysis of more than 100,000 animal bone fragments excavated from the site, the builders of Göbekli Tepe were hunter-gatherers. Zooarchaeologist Joris Peters, who has been analyzing bones from the site since 1998, reported that more than 60% of those bones belong to gazelle. The rest come from wild boar, wild sheep, red deer, and at least a dozen bird species, vultures, cranes, ducks, and geese. According to Peters, and I love this quote from the Smithsonian, he said, "The first year, we went through 15,000 pieces of animal bone, all of them wild. It was pretty clear we were dealing with a hunter-gatherer site. It's been the same every year since. All wild. Not a single domesticated animal bone in the whole site. These were nomadic people. People who followed herds. People who gathered wild plants. And yet, to build this, they needed hundreds of workers, fed and sustained for months." Researchers also discovered enormous carved stone vessels at the site. According to archaeologist Laura Dietrich of the DAI, who analyzed thousands of grinding tools and stone vessels that had been largely ignored for years, these vessels were large enough to hold up to 43 gallons of liquid. It is believed by several researchers that these were used for large-scale food, and possibly beer, production from wild grains. And here's the theory that changes everything. It is suggested by researchers, including Klaus Schmidt himself, that the sheer demands of building this place may have actually been what pushed people toward agriculture in the first place. Not the other way around. Maybe the temple didn't come after civilization. Maybe the temple created civilization. Alright. Now I want to get into some of the stranger discoveries. Because this is where the story goes somewhere genuinely unexpected. Beyond the animals, and some of those carvings are breathtakingly beautiful, by the way, carved with real skill using nothing but flint tools, there are other images at Göbekli Tepe that researchers are still trying to fully understand. On one pillar, there is a carving of a headless human figure alongside a vulture. On another, there is a figure, sometimes referred to in the literature as the gift bearer, depicted kneeling and, according to the research, appearing to hold a human head in its hands. And then there are the actual human skulls. In 2017, a team led by Dr. Julia Greski of the German Archaeological Institute published a peer-reviewed study in the journal Science Advances. They reported the discovery of 3 human skull fragments, bearing intentional modifications unlike anything found at any other prehistoric site from this period. Deep, deliberately carved grooves, running sagittally, that means front to back, across the foreheads. Cut marks made with flint tools, confirmed through microscopic analysis. And one skull with a drilled hole, positioned, according to the study, specifically so that the skull could be suspended from a cord, hanging level, facing forward. Red ochre pigment was found coating one of the fragments. According to Dr. Greski, this could represent, and these are her words, a new, previously undocumented variation of skull cult in the early Neolithic. Were these honored ancestors? Dispatched enemies displayed as warning? Some ritual we have no language for yet? Historians suggest we may never know for certain. What we can say, according to the peer-reviewed research, is that the people of Göbekli Tepe had a deep, complex, and deliberate relationship with human remains, particularly with the skull. And in the broader context of the site, the headless figures, the vultures, the gift-bearer, it is believed by researchers that the skull held enormous symbolic power for these people. Power we're only beginning to understand. Here's where the story takes a genuinely fascinating turn. Because for years, decades, everyone basically agreed on one thing. Göbekli Tepe was a ritual site. A temple. A gathering place for nomads. Klaus Schmidt himself famously called it a cathedral on a hill. He believed no one lived here permanently. His interpretation was that bands of hunter-gatherers would come together periodically, build a stone enclosure, feast, celebrate, connect, and then leave. Come back years later. Do it again. For a long time, that was the story. But after Schmidt's death in 2014, a new generation of researchers took over the excavation. Chief among them, Lee Clare, now the field director at Göbekli Tepe for the German Archaeological Institute. And Clare's team started finding things that didn't fit Schmidt's picture. Hearths. Middens, ancient trash pits. Storage features. Evidence of daily domestic activity. A cistern carved from bedrock, 25 feet across and almost 8 feet deep. A carved channel in the bedrock, a system for collecting rainwater, which Clare described as a good indication of domestic settlement. And the grinding tools. Thousands of them, stone grinding tools and carved vessels that had been excavated over decades and largely ignored. DAI archaeologist Laura Dietrich went back and analyzed them properly. Her conclusion, according to published research, they showed clear evidence of large-scale grain and legume processing, for both special feasting occasions and everyday household use. As Clare himself reportedly said, "We found middens, fireplaces, hearths, all smelling very domestic. For me, there was domestic activity from the beginning right to the very end." Meanwhile, architect-turned-archaeologist Moritz Kinzel re-examined the old excavation reports and found evidence that the large buildings had been repaired and rebuilt multiple times, meaning they weren't ritually buried and abandoned. They were used, maintained, lived around. Kinzel's conclusion: I see this not as a site for cults and death, but as a full settlement. There's a relationship between the special enclosures and daily life. It really tells a much richer story than before. A village. With a cathedral at its heart. Both things. At the same time. Sometimes the most human answer is, it's complicated. And now I want to share with you the interpretation of Göbekli Tepe that I find the most emotionally powerful. The one that, honestly, kind of breaks my heart a little. It comes from Field Director Lee Clare, and archaeologist Thomas Zimmerman of Bilkent University. Their theory, and it's controversial, not everyone agrees, is that Göbekli Tepe wasn't the beginning of civilization. It was the end of something. Think about the animals carved on these pillars. Not cattle. Not sheep. Not the calm, useful animals you'd expect at a farming community starting out. According to researchers, the animals at Göbekli Tepe are overwhelmingly dangerous, wild, threatening ones. Scorpions. Vipers. Spiders. Vultures. Foxes, which in the symbolic world of this region represent cunning and the untamed wild. According to Clare, these aren't decorations. They are identity statements. They are saying, we are hunters. We are of the wild. We are not like those people settling in the valleys below. Because here's the context, at the same time Göbekli Tepe was being built and occupied, other groups across the region were beginning to farm. They were settling down. Domesticating animals. Planting crops. The Neolithic revolution was beginning. And it is believed, according to Clare and Zimmerman, that the people of Göbekli Tepe were resisting that change with everything they had. They were building stone monuments to a way of life that was disappearing. And then, around 8200 BCE, according to researchers, occupation at Göbekli Tepe simply stopped. No gradual transition. No slow adoption of farming. No gentle fade. Just gone. As Clare reportedly said, all of the art and narratives are there to emphasize this dying hunter-gatherer tradition. Then it collapsed. That explains why the people there don't trickle out, they just disappear. The last stand. Of the last hunters. I don't know about you, but that is one of the most human stories I've ever heard from 12,000 years ago. And here's the part where I have to tell you, the story isn't over. Not even close. According to the Taz Tepler, or Stone Hills, archaeological project, currently being conducted by Turkish and international researchers, Göbekli Tepe is now recognized as just one of dozens of similar sites in southeastern Turkey. At Karahan Tepe, about 30 miles to the southeast, excavations have uncovered extraordinary things. A 2.3-meter-tall human statue, seated on a stone bench, holding a phallus, described by experts as one of the most impressive examples of prehistoric art ever found. And in 2025, according to widely reported announcements from the excavation team, a T-shaped pillar was revealed with a human face carved on its upper section, the first time in history a face has been found on the top portion of one of these iconic T-pillars. At Sayburg, a statue described by researchers as potentially depicting a deceased person, with what appears to be a stitched mouth, was uncovered in 2025. Experts believe it may relate to burial practices and the treatment of the dead. And at Sefer Tepe, stone slabs with two human faces carved in high relief on their edges, side by side, one positioned slightly lower than the other, were discovered on what appears to be a bench or seating area. According to researchers, Göbekli Tepe was never the exception. It was always the beginning of a much, much larger picture that we're only just starting to see. So here's what I keep coming back to. Every single time I read about this place. These people had, by every old definition, nothing. No farms. No cities. No metal. No writing. No wheels. And yet they looked at each other, across hunter-gatherer bands from across an entire region, and they said, let's build something. Let's make something that means something. Let's carve our world into stone so the world knows we were here. And they did. And it survived 12,000 years. Long enough for us to find it. Long enough for us to stand in front of those pillars and feel, across all those millennia, something we can only call recognition. As Archaeology magazine put it after years of new research, our distant ancestors were, perhaps, not so different from us after all. They were complex, communal, often contradictory, and capable of building great things. Sound familiar? That's Göbekli Tepe. Still standing. Still asking us questions. Still waiting for us to catch up. If any part of this story hit you, drop it in the comments. Subscribe if you're new here. There are more stories just like this one waiting for you. And I'll see you in the next one.